You've been spending too much time with him. Iris lifted her head from her phone and looked at me, frowning slightly. What are you talking about? She slowly placed her phone face down on the armrest of the couch, as if she wanted to hide what she had been doing. David. I saw a flicker of irritation in her eyes, but she quickly sighed and rolled her eyes, as if I was bringing this up again for no reason. Caleb, seriously? We're just talking. He's our tenant, not my lover. I never said he was. I crossed my arms over my chest, trying to keep my emotions in check. But you spend more time with him than you do with me. That's ridiculous. Iris got up from the couch, folding her arms across her chest. I talked to him because he's an interesting person. You said it yourself, he's a great guy. Yeah, but that doesn't mean you should be sitting with him late at night in the kitchen, sharing thoughts, laughing at his jokes. I trailed off, feeling uncomfortable just saying it out loud. She laughed at him the same way she used to laugh at my jokes. Iris narrowed her eyes, studying me like she was trying to gauge how serious I was. Are you jealous? I wanted to say no. I wanted to say I was just concerned, that I didn't like the way it looked. But the words stuck in my throat. It's not jealousy, I finally forced out. I ran a hand down my face and exhaled heavily. It's bothering me. It feels like I don't know, something between you two. She shook her head and crossed her arms again, not out of irritation this time, but as if she were protecting herself. You're overthinking this. Maybe I was. But this feeling had been growing inside me for weeks. At that moment, the hallway door creaked, and a second later, David stepped into the living room. Hey, guys, he said with a smile, oblivious to the tension in the room. He was holding a bottle of water. Everything okay? I opened my mouth to say something, but Iris spoke first. Yeah, everything's great. She smiled, easily, casually, as if we hadn't just been having a tense conversation. Going for a run? She asked, nodding toward his running shorts and t-shirt. Yeah, figured now's the best time before it gets dark. Great idea. I clenched my fists, watching their exchange. It all seemed too natural, too effortless. And yet, as I looked at her, at the way she smiled at him, at how easily she switched gears, I couldn't shake one question from my mind. Was this really just the harmless conversation Iris claimed it to be? David had moved into our house 3 months ago. Iris and I had resisted the idea of renting out a room for a long time, but the money was running out faster than we could cover the bills. At first, it seemed temporary, a small financial rough patch we would get through. Then the debt started weighing heavier, and one day, staring at our bank account, we realized we wouldn't make it without extra income. Our house wasn't big, but one of the bedrooms had been empty ever since my sister moved out. The solution was obvious. We could rent it out, even though the idea of having a stranger under our roof wasn't exactly appealing. David turned out to be the perfect tenant. He was polite, friendly, and always paid on time. He worked in IT, lived a healthy lifestyle, went running in the mornings, and cooked his own meals without leaving dirty dishes in the sink. What more could we ask for? But over time, I started to notice that his presence in the house had become more than just that of a tenant. He and Iris talked easily, as if they had known each other forever. She laughed at his jokes, discussed movies with him that we had never watched together, and sometimes stayed with him in the kitchen longer than I was comfortable with. It had all started subtly, like a light breeze that doesn't seem alarming at first. But one day, you realize that breeze is carrying a storm. I kept telling myself it was just friendly conversation, that I was being an idiot for seeing something more in it. But with each passing day, the doubt grew stronger. And now, watching the way Iris smiled at David, the way their conversation flowed so effortlessly, I couldn't shake the thought. Had he become more than just a tenant in this house? I was never the kind of man who looked for evidence. I wasn't the type to go through my wife's phone or check her messages, not the kind to make a scene over nothing. I trusted Iris. Always. But something had changed. Something gnawed at me from the inside, refusing to let go. I wanted to believe it was just my fears, that I was being paranoid, seeing problems where there were none. But then why did her voice sound tense whenever I came home earlier than expected? Why was her phone always lying face down? Why did she keep disappearing with him? Into the kitchen, the garage, the porch. so lost in conversation that she didn't even notice me watching. I tried not to think about it. Tried. Until one evening, I stumbled upon something that put everything into perspective. I came home earlier than usual. The rain was pouring, drowning out the noise of the city, muffling the sounds of passing cars. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I shut the door, shook the water off my jacket, and looked around. Iris. No response. Only a dim light spilled from underneath our bedroom door upstairs. I took a few steps toward the stairs but suddenly froze. A sound. Faint, barely noticeable, but out of place. A soft click, like someone closing a laptop in a hurry, or putting a phone away. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, my heart suddenly out of rhythm. Iris. I called again, this time louder. A second passed, then another, and finally, her voice. Yeah, I'm here. Her voice was strained. Something clenched inside me, but I forced myself to ignore it. I climbed the stairs and stepped into our bedroom. Iris sat cross-legged on the bed. Her laptop was closed, and her phone rested beside her, screen down. "You're home already?" she asked without looking up. I nodded, pulling off my damp jacket. "Finished early. What are you up to?" "Oh, nothing, just browsing the internet." She shrugged. I glanced at her laptop, then at her phone. Usually, when I came home, she was reading or texting with friends. But now, her laptop was shut. Her phone sat untouched beside her, and her face was frozen in a tense smile. She was hiding something. I nodded slowly. "All right, I'm gonna take a shower." I turned and stepped into the bathroom, closed the door, but didn't turn on the water. Through the silence, I heard it. A quiet tap. The subtle click of a finger on a screen. I shut my eyes. She had just deleted something. Something she didn't want me to see. I didn't confront her that night. Didn't ask what she was hiding. But something inside me broke. The doubts I had buried deep began to take root, poisoning every moment I spent in this house. I started noticing things that once seemed insignificant. Iris spent too much time with David. They laughed at jokes I wasn't part of, discussed movies we had never watched together. Sometimes, she went to the garage, saying she was helping him with his car. She never knew a damn thing about cars. But the worst part came a few weeks later. I started catching her in lies. She'd say she went to bed early, but I'd find her footprints on the kitchen mat at 3 in the morning. She'd claim she hadn't texted David, yet I'd see his name flashing on her screen when she thought I wasn't looking. She never said anything, but her actions spoke for her. I wasn't the only man in this house. I wasn't looking for proof. I never wanted to find it. But one day, by some cruel twist of fate, I saw everything. I was coming home, a bag of groceries in hand. The sky was still gray, but the rain had stopped. I stepped onto the walkway, heading toward the front door, when something made me glance toward the kitchen window. And I froze. They were standing there. Iris was barefoot, wearing one of her oversized home t-shirts, her hair loosely tied in a messy bun. David was talking, gesturing with his hands, and then he laughed. She smiled back. Not the way she normally did. Not the way a married woman smiles at a neighbor. The way a woman smiles at a man. And then he lifted his hand and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. My heart clenched. I stood there, unable to believe what I was seeing. She didn't pull away. Worse, her fingers brushed lightly against his wrist. The world around me shrank to a single point. Time stopped. I couldn't move. This was the truth. Ugly, painful, but real. They were together. Not just friends. Not just tenant and landlord. She belonged to him, just as she once belonged to me. Something inside me snapped. I took a step back. Then another. I wanted to believe this wasn't what it looked like. But deep down I knew. It was exactly what it looked like. My fingers went slack, and the grocery bag slipped from my hand. Somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed shut. I didn't hear it. I didn't feel anything, except the pain tearing through me from the inside out. She betrayed me, and now I couldn't unsee it. I was never the kind of man to make a scene, but right now, a storm raged inside me, and I could no longer hold it back. I don't remember how I got inside the house. All I remember is my body moving on its own, my heart pounding in my chest, and one word repeating over and over in my head. Betrayal. I shoved the kitchen door open so hard it slammed against the wall. What the hell is going on here? The voices stopped. Iris flinched and spun around, her eyes wide with shock, while David froze like a statue. They stood too close together, and I didn't need any more proof. My breathing was uneven. My fingers curled into fists. Caleb! Iris blinked, her face twisting with panic. You're home early. She took a step toward me, but I raised my hand sharply, stopping her. Don't. My voice was low, rough, laced with fury that was moments away from boiling over. Caleb, this isn't what it looks like, she blurted out, but her voice wavered. I laughed. Loud, sharp, almost hysterical. Oh, really? It's not what I think. I stepped closer, and David immediately averted his gaze. You're telling me I didn't just see him touching your hair? That I didn't see you let him? Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Go ahead, explain. I threw my hands up, feeling the rage burn through me. Explain to me what the hell I just saw. We were just talking, she forced out, locking eyes with me. You're misunderstanding. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. Misunderstanding? I repeated, shaking my head slowly. Are you seriously trying to deny this? She exhaled, trying to appear calm, but I saw the way her hands trembled. Caleb, you're exhausted. You said yourself you've been under a lot of stress. You're seeing things that aren't there. I went still. She's lying to my face. My heart pounded harder. I'm exhausted? I hissed. So I just imagined you letting this asshole put his hands on you? I snapped toward David. And you son of a bitch, are you really going to stand there and pretend like nothing's happening? He lifted his hands and took a step back. Look, Caleb, it's not what you think. My fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I saw everything. David opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I turned back to Iris. Her eyes were glossy with unshed tears. Caleb, her voice was soft, broken. I didn't mean for this to happen. Bullshit. I exhaled slowly, trying not to let my rage spill over completely. You didn't mean for this to happen? She nodded frantically, her lips trembling. I swear, it didn't mean anything. Nothing? I slammed my fist against the table, and she gasped. You let him touch you. You spent time with him behind my back, and you want me to believe it meant nothing? She let out a strangled sob, covering her face with her hands. Caleb, please. How long? I breathed heavily, trying to stay in control. What? Don't act like you don't understand. She swallowed, her gaze darting around the room like she was searching for an escape. Caleb, how long have you been cheating on me? Silence. I watched her struggle, the uneven rise and fall of her chest, the way her eyes flickered with fear. And in that moment, I knew. She couldn't lie. Iris exhaled, balling her hands into fists. A month. A dull, crushing blow to the chest. I swayed slightly, gripping the edge of the table. A month. She had lied to me. Slept with him. For a month. I closed my eyes. The walls, the furniture, the light in the room. Everything lost meaning. The world around me shrank into a single, merciless word. Betrayal. Caleb. I lifted a hand, stopping her. I didn't want to hear her voice. I didn't want to see her face. I didn't want to know anything else. I turned to David. Get out. He blinked. What? I took a step forward. You heard me. Pack your shit. I don't want to see you in this house. He glanced at Iris, but she didn't say a word. And that's when I knew. She wasn't going to defend him. Okay, he mumbled. I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to destroy everything in sight. And then Iris spoke again. Caleb, I'm sorry. I looked at her. The same face. The same woman I loved. But now, I couldn't see her anymore. I hate you. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. I needed to breathe. I drove through the empty streets, watching the rain blur the glow of streetlights. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My chest felt tight, as if the air around me had thickened into something heavy, suffocating, like tar. The house was no longer mine. I couldn't go back. I wasn't welcome there. And the worst part, I wasn't needed there anymore. Every time I blinked, that damned image flashed behind my eyes. His hand, tucking her hair behind her ear. How easy it was. She didn't even think to pull away. One word echoed in my mind. Betrayal. I turned into an empty parking lot beside an abandoned supermarket and killed the engine. Fury burned inside me, but my mind remained cold. This wasn't the time for breakdowns. This was the time for a plan. I reached for my phone and typed into the search bar, "Best divorce attorneys in Denver." My hands trembled, not from nerves, but from hatred. Our marriage had died the moment she chose him. I scrolled through a few sites, reading about asset division, spousal support, and how to make sure she wouldn't get a damn cent more than she deserved. She deserved nothing. I came across a reputable law firm and saved the number. I'd call first thing in the morning. Let her think she had time, that she could sway me, convince me, weave another lie. I wouldn't give her the chance. I returned a few hours later. Not because I wanted to, because I had to finish what she started. I didn't bother using the front door. I just unlocked the garage and stepped inside. Iris stood in the kitchen, hunched over a cup of tea. She lifted her tear-streaked face to look at me, but I felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. "You came back," she said, her voice hoarse quiet. "Only to finish what you started," I said coldly. She swallowed hard. "Caleb, please." I laughed. "Oh, here we go." I tossed my keys onto the table, crossing my arms. "What is it this time? Are you gonna say it was a mistake? That you didn't mean it?" She flinched as if I'd struck her. "You know I didn't want this." "Bullshit." I slammed my fist against the table, making her cup tremble. "You made a choice, Iris. A conscious one." She buried her face in her hands. "I don't know what's wrong with me. You betrayed me." I said it plainly, emotionlessly, but inside, everything burned. "Caleb, I'm filing for divorce." She flinched. What? "Divorce, Iris. The end." Her lips quivered. You're not even going to try." "Try what?" I laughed again, feeling something inside me crack. "Try to forgive you?" She nodded, wiping away a tear. "I can't." I looked at her and no longer saw my wife, only a cheater. "You did this," I said, my voice hollow. "You destroyed everything." She bowed her head, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I closed my eyes, collecting my thoughts. "One last thing." She lifted her gaze. "David is packing his things and leaving." Her face twisted. "Caleb, no." I froze. "What?" She stood, wiping her eyes. He has nowhere to go." I nodded slowly. "I see." That was all I could say. Iris took a step toward me. "Just give me time. We'll figure this out." "You chose him." A sharp, icy weight settled in my stomach. "Are you really choosing him over me?" She didn't answer. The silence was worse than any confession. I exhaled, unclenching my fingers. "All right." Her brows furrowed. "All right." I nodded. "I won't kick him out." Relief flashed across her face. "Caleb, thank you. We just need time." "You don't understand." I met her eyes, speaking slowly, stretching out every word. "I'm leaving." A deafening silence. What? She blinked, taking a step toward me. "You can't." I smirked. "I can. But this is our home." I grabbed my jacket and picked up my keys. "No." I turned, walking toward the door. "This is your cage now." She gasped, lunging after me. "Caleb, no." I paused at the threshold, not looking back. "Tell me one thing, Iris." I heard her hold her breath. "Did you ever think about me when you were with him?" Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. I closed my eyes. That's all I needed to know. And I walked out into the night, leaving that house behind forever. The trial lasted 4 months. 4 months of messy proceedings, endless paperwork, and Iris's desperate attempts to salvage what was already dead. I walked into the courtroom in a perfectly tailored suit. Calm, confident, focused. I wasn't the broken husband she could manipulate, stall, or guilt trip. I was a man who had been betrayed. Iris, on the other hand, looked wrecked. I had seen her like this before, When things didn't go her way at work, when her childhood cat died, when she got bad news. But today, she was crushed under the weight of her own betrayal. Dark circles framed her hollow eyes, her hair had lost its shine, and her clothes hung loosely on her, as if she had lost weight. Maybe she had. David was gone. I had found out before the trial, but I didn't bother acknowledging it. It wasn't worth it. He never planned to help her pay for the house. Never planned to support her. He had enjoyed her body, her loyalty, her trust. And when reality hit, he disappeared. Cowardly piece of shit. I wasn't surprised. But Iris, she looked like her world had collapsed. I was flipping through the final set of documents near the courtroom entrance when I heard her voice. Caleb. I didn't flinch, didn't react. I simply turned around, slowly. She stood a few feet away, her hands clenched into fists, as if afraid to come closer. What? She swallowed hard, her lips trembling slightly. Can we talk? I glanced at my watch. You have 5 minutes. She took a deep breath, like she was bracing herself for an icy plunge. David left. I felt nothing. I had already known, but she wanted me to react. I wouldn't. I raised an eyebrow. And? She bit her lip. He wasn't going to help with the house. I smirked. Oh, really? She looked away, her fingers trembling. I thought we'd be okay, but I took a step closer. But he used you. Her gaze snapped back to mine, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She had no idea what to do. I understood everything in that moment. David never intended to stay with her. I shook my head. You destroyed everything for him. Her eyelashes glistened with tears. I know. And she looked at me with desperation. I regret it. I smiled. Too late. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I shoved my hands into my pockets. It's time. I turned and walked into the courtroom. She followed behind, quietly, defeated, already knowing she had lost. The judge was firm but fair. Based on the evidence and testimonies presented, the court grants the dissolution of the marriage between Caleb and Iris. I felt nothing. No joy. No anger. Just relief. My lawyer straightened and offered me his hand. Congratulations, he said with a slight smile. I shook his hand and glanced at Iris. She looked lost. The judge opened the file. What about the division of assets? I nodded. The house is hers. I smirked. Let her choke on it. She didn't want it. But that was her problem now. After the trial, I was heading toward the exit when I heard her voice again. Caleb. I stopped but didn't turn around. She stepped closer. Are you happy? I chuckled. Are you? She didn't answer. I turned and met her gaze. Do you regret it? She broke down in tears. I said nothing. I just nodded and walked away, leaving her alone with her choices. And me? I stepped outside, inhaled the crisp air, and smiled. I was free.